Welcome to Whips in the Dungeon 101.19. Today we're going to look at characteristics of a good short whip. A short whip is any whip we're going to define it as any whip that's less than 6 feet. If we get longer than 6 feet, we're going to call it a long whip. I'm going to show you two whips that I consider almost perfect in their plaiting. Every whip's unique, but I judge all whips based on the standard that these two whips set. This first whip is a 4-foot Mike Murphy whip. There's 3 tests that I run or that I do with any whip as I'm trying to judge it. The first is just, I want to take my hand down the length of the thong, and you can close your eyes to do this. And what you're doing is you're feeling for a continuous, smooth taper, and you don't want to feel any transitions. There are very few whips that I consider a perfect whip. This Mike Murphy meets my test for a perfect whip. You might look at the whip closely and be able to see a transition, but you shouldn't be able to feel that transition when you run your hand down that continuously tapering cylinder. Test 1. Test 2 is roll out. How does that whip roll out? We want that whip to roll out perfectly straight so that it hits the exact target that we pointed at. This whip has a perfectly straight rollout. If it rolls out and takes a 4-inch jog before it reaches its end, then you're never going to be able to aim it, point it, and hit your target in a dark dungeon. So rollout is the second test. The third test is the most difficult test, and very few whips pass this test. Take about 18 inches of the thong in an arc, and I want you to roll the whip in your fingers 360 degrees circumference around the plaiting and look for any kinks or noticeable transitions in that arc. Okay, first 18 inches passed. We go to the next 18 inches. The last half of a whip is always the most difficult because of the drops and the rapid taper. I'm going to roll that one around 18 inches. It's pretty good. There was a little bit of a jog right there, but nothing significant. The other benchmark we're going to look at is a Joe Strain 3-foot snake whip, 12 plat, same test. I run my hand down. I feel no transitions. Maybe a little one right there, but almost perfect. I roll it out. It rolls out perfectly straight. Third test, I roll it around on its circumference. It passes that test. I roll it around this way on its circumference. There's that little kink that I felt on the back side. Okay, so some of you are going to ask me, why am I doing that test? Well, because we're throwing a forward figure 8 and we're throwing on our backhand, we want the whip to roll out perfectly straight with the natural belly, but then when I turn the whip over and I'm rolling it or throwing it out against its spine, it won't roll out with the same flexibility, but we at least want it to have an arc where it will arc through and be accurate. I'm going to pick on another platter here for a minute, only because he was really good at being able to fix that. Blake Bruning, 4-foot bullwhip. It rolls out straight with the belly, but the first time he made the whip, when I would turn it over on the backhand, it would go out and take a jog. I told him what the problem was. I sent him the whip back. He rebuilt it for me, and it's perfect. So for a platter to be able to take feedback and then correct the issue that you're seeing, to me, says he's really good. Okay, Blake's whip has a little more Viagra than what I like. Viagra, when I talk about Viagra, I'm talking about the stiffness in the first maybe 18 inches of the thong. That's going to affect the rollout. This whip rolls about halfway out and then kind of flops forward. Some people would say, well, just keep breaking it in. Well, I've been breaking this whip in for almost 3 years and it keeps doing that. So many people will love a Blake Bruning whip because they like that extra Viagra. I find that I need a little bit better natural rollout than that. So this third test, it's getting a little bit of a, I don't know if you can see that, right about there. The bottom half of this whip does very well. The thongs, very straight and true. It rolls very straight, has a little bit more Viagra than what I like. So we go from a little too much Viagra to a little not quite enough Viagra. Casey Tyler, Dove whips. Really, really, really smooth as a baby's butt. At Mike Murphy standard as far as smoothness, no transitions. This whip is going to roll out beautifully. Great natural rollout, very straight. Very straight. Third test, roll it around on itself. First half is very good. Second half, very good. Well, you'd say, wow, perfect whip. It is with the 3 tests I just showed you, but I can tell you when I throw it, it throws light, meaning it lands higher than where I point because it floats a little bit. That's a little bit of a problem in the dungeon. Joe Strain bullwhip. Now I love Joe Strain snake whip. The bullwhip Joe Strain made me. 3 tests, okay? Smooth as a baby's butt. Rolls out. Hopefully the babies won't get offended. And then the third test is roll it around on itself. These are beautiful whips. Okay, so what's wrong with this Joe Strain? This Joe Strain throws consistently high. If I point it, it's going to throw 4 to 6 inches higher than where I point it. So I don't like using it in the dungeon. If anybody out there wants a Joe Strain, a 4-foot Joe Strain bullwhip with a 10-inch handle, write me, because it's just sitting in my closet. I won't throw it in the dungeon. Peter Jack, you've heard me talk about Peter a lot. He's one of my favorite whip makers. Here we go. Peter doesn't pass the smoothness test. It's smooth down to here. I can feel the transition, okay? And then only 1 transition in 4 foot. It rolls out. This is the strength of Peter's whip, in my opinion, is the rollout is really smooth, very natural. It goes right where I point it. Very important to me. Will it pass the roll around test? First 18 inches of thong, it does. That's the easiest 18 inches. The most difficult 18 inches is the second 18 inches of the whip. Pretty good. It's got a few little bumps in it. Not a perfect whip, not as perfect as the Murphy, but it rolls straight and true in the dungeon. So even though it may not be quite as pretty, as nice a plaiting as maybe the Strain or the Casey Tyler, I put it ahead of those 2 because it goes exactly where I point it. Very important. Skip Sansui, wooden handle bullwhip. Okay, you can see the profile of this whip is a little thicker here in the shot bag. It's heavier. Okay. Passes that first test, fine. Rolls out straight. We're just looking at part of my herd today, because in looking at my herd, you're looking at the 3 characteristics I look for when I pick a whip up at a show or when I pull a whip out of the box after I've done a custom order. I'd love to show you Viper's whips. I'm waiting on 3 whips from Viper right now. So maybe when they get here, I'll do another video, show you Viper's whips. So Skip's passes all 3 tests. The only downside of Skip's is it's a little heavier. Some people like a heavier shot bag. You're gonna love Skip's whip if that's you. But I have a popped long bicep and a torn rotator cuff, so I judiciously throw Skip's whip because I can't throw it very long. This is the same whip with a 3-foot. 3-foot little wooden handle bullwhip. 3-foot bullwhips are very hard to make because you have to drop plats so quickly to achieve that taper. Okay, and see, this one isn't perfect because of that problem. There's one there, there's a transition there. It doesn't affect the rollout of the whip, really. Although if you can see it, I don't know if you can see it, it rolls out straight, and then the last 6 inches it falls a little slightly to the right. The may or may not be an issue when you're throwing a whip that short. That first part of the test isn't too bad. Yeah, there's a couple of jogs right there. All right, another little 3-foot bullwhip axle. You've got all this variegated herringbone. Looks fancy, but what you want to look for is it plaited perfectly straight? I can feel a transition there, one there. So the bottom half of this whip is what I call a rocky road because you can feel the transitions. If I roll this whip out, and I don't know if you can see it, can we see that Moodstone?
Yes, Master.
This whip doesn't roll the same way 2 times in a row. Okay? Now, I've thrown this whip many times in the dungeon. It's a little 3-foot bullwhip, and in 3 foot, that's not going to be off enough that I'll miss my 4-inch circle of target or shoulder or butt that I'm hitting at. But I'm just saying, if we're comparing one whip to another whip, this whip doesn't roll out twice the same way. We roll it around like this. You can see that it doesn't make a perfect arc. The second half doesn't make a perfect arc. That may be why it's not rolling out the same way 2 times in a row. Victortella, a little 3-foot snake. I don't know if you can see. Can you see that, Moodstone? Can they see that? If you look very, very closely at that plaiting, I don't even need to run my hand down this to tell you that that's like a rocky road. It's smooth to about here, and then it starts feeling like it has potholes in it. Okay? Does it roll straight? Some of these whip makers are not going to like me, but I'm just telling you what it is compared to a Murphy and a Strang. Okay? Roll straight, throw straight. To throw straight, it'd be okay in the dungeon. It may not be at that one standard, but if it throws straight, it'll be fine in the dungeon. Okay, that arc doesn't have a clean arc there. And this is where the rocky road is. It just doesn't roll around on itself. Okay, so it is what it is. Okay, Evan Fava, last whip we're going to look at. Evan's right where Blake Bruning is. A little more Viagra in the whip than what I like. That extra Viagra in the first 18 inches of thong is going to affect its rollout. It's not going to roll out quite as smooth. I like that smooth rollout because that kind of goes with my style of throwing. Now, if you like more Viagra, you're going to like an Evan Fava bullwhip. It's a little bit heavier, not as heavy as the Skip Sansui, but a little bit heavier. It has a transition there, one there, 2. It says a 4.5-foot bullwhip. 2 noticeable transitions in the 4.5 feet. Third test. Y'all are getting bored with this, I know. But I tried to describe this in my book. Very hard to describe in a written book. Much easier to see it on film. And that rolls around, that's pretty good. Okay, so aside from the Viagra and it being a little bit heavier, my Evan Fava bullwhip is a fine bullwhip. Thank you for watching Whips in the Dungeon 401.19. Today's key word is, we're going to have two actually. It's keeper, but I would also accept fall hitch for the key word today.